Good afternoon, everyone. Let me welcome us to this, our fourth and final general meeting of the National Conservation Council for the year 2022. Because it is a general meeting, it means we have members of the public and indeed the press attending online this afternoon, and we say a special welcome to all of those members. John, as I understand it, we have a quorum at this time.
Yes, sir. We have a
Continue.
quorum at this time.
Sure. Are there any other apologies besides, for the records, any other apologies besides the two which we knew of beforehand?
No, sir. We have Stuart Mailer, who is traveling, and Harrison Bothwell sends apologies due to another commitment.
Thanks, John. Are there any particular interests, members of council, any particular interest in any matter before us this afternoon?
None that I'm aware of.
No, Mr. Chair.
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 Good, thanks. Bearing in mind that we can hear but not necessarily see all of you in this arrangement, so it's good to hear you respond vocally to it. We move on then to number two, item number 2 on our agenda, confirmation of our minutes. And the minutes were circulated to us. And therefore, I would ask then, are there any corrections for page number 1 of our minutes? How about page number 2? Page number 3? And the last page, which is page number 4. In that case, could I ask that someone move the adoption of our minutes?
I move, Mr. Chair. Lisa.
Thanks, Lisa. A seconder?
I can second, Mr. Chair. Jessica Harvey speaking.
Sure, thanks, Jessica. And in our welcome moments ago, I overlooked the fact, of course, that Kevin Thompson is with us for the first time today. We welcome you, Kevin. And Kevin is with us representing planning.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Takes us to item number 3 on our agenda for today, matters arising from previous minutes.
Jeannie, when she's doing.
Okay. Mr. Chair, I would like to ask if the Department of Environment's Mr. Fred Burton, who is online with us, could take us through the presentation on the alien species regulations, and which segues quite nicely into item 3A2, which are the procedures for controlling cats in environmentally sensitive areas. So I will deal with that once Fred has done with the alien species regulations themselves. So if we can
Okay,
ask.
thanks, Ms. G.
Okay, can everyone hear me well?
Yes, thank
Yes,
you.
We're hearing you, Fred.
Thank you. All right, so Council will be aware that the National Conservation Alien Species Regs 2022 have been passed now, and we are in the very earliest stages of what is going to have to be an extensive public consultation period. The initial impetus for these regs came actually from the Solicitor General's office some years ago, when they were representing us in a request for judicial review that was brought by the Humane Society and Feline Friends, and which led to a 4-year halt in our work to reduce the feral cat population in Little Cayman. So the Solicitor General's office advised that provisions in the Conservation Act itself were weak on powers to control alien species, and they advised us that regulations ideally should be implemented. So these regs that have just passed address that issue. They also fill a number of other gaps in local legislation. So we now have definitions that distinguish between domestic and agricultural animals and plants on the one side, and then specimens of those same species which are living in the wild and are deemed to be feral. With safeguards still in place on humane treatment of animals, formal provisions are now in place to enable control of alien species, including feral specimens of domestic and agricultural animals and plants. These regs also create a list of prohibited species, which are those species which pose such severe threats to the environment that they must be banned from import, and any currently in captivity must be prevented from breeding, and they can only be kept subject to permit. Release of any alien species, and that includes feral specimens of agricultural and domestic animals, to the wild is illegal, and the exact meaning of the wild and release is clearly defined now in these regs. That's really the big summary of these regs, and I think the best thing is if you haven't read them, have a good look. It basically enables us now as a department to conduct alien species control under our own National Conservation Act and regulations, whereas hitherto anything to do with feral specimens of domestic animals or agricultural animals, we had to rely on the Animals Act, which was passed so many years ago and is actually under active revision at the moment, but it was a much less than ideal situation to be operating. So we're in a much better position, for instance, now for managing the feral cat control on Little Cayman. We're no longer obligated to use a Department of Agriculture vet. We can use any vet. The Conservation Council now has the power to make decisions about what are acceptable means of control and what are not. So this is what brings us to the second part that Gina is mentioning, because an immediate outcome of these regulations is that procedures for the control of feral specimens that are issued under the Conservation Act by the Director DofE now requires us to consult the Department of Agriculture and gain the assent of Council. And we're planning in 2013 to continue feral cat control in Little Cayman and in remote parts of Cayman Brac. And the National Trust for Iguana Conservation staff are engaged in feral cat control in certain areas protected under the National Trust Act. So we need to bring one of these procedure documents to you today and seek your assent and your chairman's signature. DofA, the Department of Agriculture, has already signed off on this. So I think Gina wants to put this document to you.
Yes, thank you, Fred. Thanks very much. So the document is included in the agenda bundle. Hopefully you've had the opportunity to review it. So essentially these are the procedures which section 6(2)(a)(k) of the National Conservation Act provides for the Director of Environment to develop criteria for determining whether wild populations or proposed introductions of alien or genetically altered species might harm or do harm to any of the natural resources of the islands, and procedures for regulating and controlling such populations and introductions. As Fred says, the regulations that were just passed subsequent to this and under this provision of the law now require that when we actually propose procedures for regulating and controlling populations of alien invasive species, that we do so in consultation with the Department of Agriculture and with the approval of the NCC. So what we have done is created a document which outlines the background, the purpose of these procedures. Obviously, it is to enable us to control feral cats, specifically in environmentally sensitive areas. So the purpose recites the literature basically on which highlights the impact of feral cats when they're introduced outside of their natural range, the impact on mammals and birds, and particularly their impact in small island settings. It then goes on to enumerate the sites that are considered as top priority areas for feral cat work control in 2023, and these, as Fred had intimated before, are basically all of Little Cayman, the brown booby nesting areas and the eastern bluff of Cayman Brac and the eastern limits of Long Beach. And in respect of the National Trust work in the Queen Elizabeth II Botanic Park, the Salina Reserve, and the Colliers Wilderness Reserve, where the control there may be led by National Trust staff working in the Blue Iguana Conservation Program. So essentially, any feral cat control operation carried out within a radius of 0.5 kilometers of any residence must provide for any cat to be scanned for a microchip, and the cat shall not be euthanized if a microchip is found, which can be traced to a person who owns it in a meaningful way, such that it cannot be classed as feral as defined under the regulations that were just passed. So domestic cats which are trapped and identified will be returned to the owner, and we've asked to assist with the identification of domestic companion cats, specifically on Little Cayman. All owners are asked to register with the DOE under a voluntary arrangement whereby an attending vet can implant a microchip if they already don't have the animal microchipped. The cat would be photographed, and we would take the owner's contact details. So in terms of the procedures for the control of the cats, we're basically saying that we are going to engage in cage trapping followed by euthanasia using standard veterinary protocols, as really it's currently the only approved method to be used. The National Conservation Council can authorize additional methods consistent with the alien species regulations that were just passed through the publication of guidelines made under the Act, Section 312. Veterinary services would, to implement euthanasia of feral cats, may be provided by any veterinarian licensed by the Cayman Islands Veterinary Board, any vet employed by the DOA, or any other person under direct instruction by such a veterinarian. So as Fred has said, I have signed off on these procedures as the proposing agency. The Department of Agriculture have signed off as we were required to consult with them. And what we're asking for now is that Council approve these procedures for control of feral cats in environmentally sensitive areas. If you have any questions, we'll be happy to take them.
Thanks, Ms. G.
Okay.
Council, are there any questions on that?
Not for me, Mr. Chair.
Heard one no. Can I take it then that there are no questions?
No questions from Frank, National Trust.
Commissioner Bradley.
Okay, and then can I ask then that we have a mover?
I guess I will move the motion to approve the procedures for control of feral cats in environmentally sensitive areas as drafted in the document which formed part of the agenda bundle.
Thanks, Mr. G.
I'll second the motion.
Thank you. Those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, Mr. Chair.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye, Mr. Chair.
Any against? Any abstentions?
I abstain, Mr. Chair.
Adrian abstains as well.
Okay, thanks. Motion has been passed. Takes us to B under section 3, judicial review, the section for the directions.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. As members will recall, the judgment on the judicial review in respect of the application at Boggy Sand Road and the construction of a two-story gazebo on that site, contrary to the direction of the National Conservation Council, or the DOE on behalf of the National Conservation Council, was heard in July of this year, June or July of this year. I can't actually remember if it was June or July. The judgment was published in August, and the Conservation Council was successful in the judicial review. That has now been appealed. That judgment has been appealed by the Central Planning Authority and the applicant. And the appeal is, to the best of my knowledge, to be heard in March of 2023. So that is really the essence of the update. We're waiting for the appeal to be heard. And I guess the other point that I should make for the record is that we were also awarded costs. The NCC was also awarded costs in respect of the judicial review action.
Thanks for the update, Ms. G. It takes us to C under section 3, protected areas, the public nominations report.
Okay, Mr. Chair, I'm actually going to turn this over to Mr. Bothwell and Mr. Burton. I'm not quite sure how they've worked it out between them to present the protected area nominations report and also the protected areas plan, which are C1 and 2 respectively on the agenda.
Sure, thank you.
Mr. Chair, I think John will take it after myself. I will present on the nominations report briefly, and then John will follow with the strategy.
Okay, thanks, Fred. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. I'm not going to try and go through this whole document because it is a very extensive document. It's also a very interesting read, and I would encourage any NCC member who hasn't yet had a look to read this through, because it represents should we say, a whole new level of public interest in the protected area nomination process. We had 89 nominations this time round. We've never had anything close to that in previous years. In fact, if we add up all of the nominations we received from 2017 until before this round, we probably wouldn't reach the same number. There's a pattern that has been persistent all the way through all of these nominations, which we get multiple calls to protect the East Lighthouse area of Cayman Brac, to protect the Central Mangrove Wetland on Grand Cayman, to protect Georgetown Ironwood Forest, and to make Barker's National Park actually a national park, because it isn't. Not yet. It's never been done. Because we had a lot of nominations, we had a lot of scoring to do. We're still scoring each and every one of these nominations using the scoring system which Council adopted some years ago. It's quite complex and slow, and we're moving towards a point where much of the Cayman Islands environmentally valuable land has now been nominated over the course of all these rounds. And this may lead to a rethink in how we process nominations more efficiently in future years, but I won't dwell on that right now. The scoring is complete, and the full scoring table of this year's nominations is in this report. All 89 nominations with a score against them. Now, we presented this to Council in working group, as you'll remember, took a close look at it, and then DOV tried to help you narrow it down. We've collectively arrived at what I'm calling a long list of areas which score highly. They respond to the main focus of the nominations, and they can be approached step by step within the budget available, subject to the agreement of the landowners concerned. So it's important to notice at this early stage, no landowners, private landowners or government, have been approached. So if the motion which is proposed after this is passed, what this will enable is it will allow DOV to start to make these preliminary inquiries and actually narrow down the focus to a short list, which will involve only the land where the owner, whether that be private or government, is agreeable to entering the process. So going back to the long list, which we narrowed down already, Council has been very mindful of the imbalance in protected area extent on the 3 islands. Just as a reminder, I think, for everybody, 6.4% of the combined area of our 3 islands is under protection by the National Conservation Act at this time. A further 5.5% is protected by the National Trust for the Cayman Islands, the National Trust Act, and that makes for a total of 11.3%. To put that in perspective, it's a long way short of the 30% goal that's being debated right now at the Biodiversity Conference of Parties in Montreal. If we look at that by island, though, it's quite interesting. 22% of Little Cayman is protected by one or other of those 2 acts, the National Conservation Act or the National Trust Act. 10.9% of Grand Cayman is protected, so that's pretty much like the average. Cayman Brac has only 5.9 protected at this time. And it's that BRAC statistic that has led to consensus that the dry forests of Cayman Brac should be given high priority if we can secure landowners willing to work with us. The council originally had $7 million available for protected land purchase in the 2022-2023 budget cycle. Some of this has already been spent because land that was in process from the 2018 nominations finally got approved to proceed, and we've been buying. So we bought the East Interior Extension in Little Cayman, and we're in the process of buying the Salina Reserve Extension. So some of this money is being spent on the 2018 nominations, which have not been forgotten. But what it means is we don't actually have an accurate figure for the funds still available, but it must be somewhere between $4 and $5 million that we're going to have available over the next 12 months. So the strategy, which John is going to go into with you, that we all agreed, is that in 2023 we focus first and foremost on dry forest areas in Central Brac. And if we run out of options there and have money left, then we'll move to the Central Mangrove Wetland with whatever funds remain. At the same time, we will enter into discussions within government regarding a whole set of Crown land nominations, which can, of course, be protected without any purchasing costs. And we're also looking to explore what may or may not be possible to progress a national park at Barkers. Before handing over to John to present the council's motion on this, I should mention that we had consensus that we need to approach Cabinet with some large area nominations. The nominations we keep receiving, but we're unable to progress as a complete vision because the cost is way beyond the budgetary allocations we've been working with to date. Depending on how these visions are received by AUKUS cabinet, they may play into the budget request for the environmental protection funds in the 2024 to 2025 cycle. Several of these areas people believe are already national parks. I mean, when when Tarpon Lake got approved as a protected area this year, there was some surprise in the community that it needed to be protected. Everybody thought it had been protected a long time ago. It's the same with Barkers. And I think this year's nominations really reaffirm the strong public interest in large national parks at the Brack's East End, big chunks of Little Cayman, Grand Cayman Central Mangrove Wetland, Georgetown Ironwood Forest, and West Bay's Barkers Peninsula. So John, over to you.
Thanks very much, Fred.
Okay. Yes, so Mr. Chairman, just to reiterate what the DOE would like to propose to Council for 2023 is that without identifying specific properties, because as Fred said, we have not, the landowners, including the Crown, have not actually been approached, but to identify some of the high conservation value areas for Council to consider, Council taking into account the consultation report which you have received, and of course, any other social or other issues Council wishes to take account of. Also, as Fred said, we need to recognizing in this process both the amount of money currently available in the budget, but also that given the amounts historically budgeted for acquisition of conservation land, some of these large parcels or large contiguous areas from multiple willing sellers would probably require special cabinet consideration, proposing their national acquisition through future special budget allocations as funds are available, but still following the processes in section 6 to 9 of the Act. So I think that is the second summation of what we're proposing is list of high-value areas for immediate contact of the landowners to see if they'd be interested in selling, in short, as well as proposing putting together special presentations to Cabinet for some of these large identified areas, again, of high conservation value, which would need to be acquired outside of the current budget system, and so Cabinet will have to put some very serious consideration to how they do that.
Okay, thanks, Fred and John. So, Council, the motion before us at this time then, the matter before us is a motion that the following areas or parcels thereof be prioritized for protection by the Council in 2023. And this is bearing in mind that the landowners and Crown, in the case of properties owned by government, would need to be willing to agree and participate in this for it to happen. So they would have to be willing to entertain the proposal. And we have some properties listed. This listing has been circulated to you, includes the Cayman Brack Dry Forest, Grand Cayman Mangrove Wetland and Parrot Habitat, Little Cayman, the Rocky Iguana Habitat, Barkers National Park, and East End of course Shrubland. Little Cayman, this is government properties, Jackson Pond and North Coast Wetland, and Little Cayman also Muddyfoot Pond, Rocky Iguana Habitat, Grand Cayman, Ironwood Forest, Grand Cayman again, the Malporters Pond, and East End Karst Shrubland. presentations will be prepared to propose to Cabinet at the national acquisition of higher cost areas using separate budget processes, but in keeping with the National Conservation Plan. So it's for council to move and accept this motion. So can I have a mover, please?
Mr.
I
Chair,
move to accept Tricia Bradley.
I'm seconding.
Thanks, Patricia and Ms. G. Those in favor?
Aye, Mr. Chair.
Aye, Mr. Chair.
Aye, Mr. Chair.
Aye, Mr. Chair.
Any against? Those abstaining?
Aye, Mr. Chair. Kevin.
Mr. Chair, I'm going to abstain because of my involvement, obviously, in the preparation of the report.
Okay, good. Thanks. Motion has been passed. Takes us into section D of 3 of our agenda. And this is work paper 4, cabinet approval of the conservation plan.
Yes, sir. Just for council's formal notice, Cabinet approved the council's species conservation plan on 8th of November 2022. We are working on gazetting the notice for this and the protected areas that Cabinet also approved this year, and then we will update the website with the formal documents. But they have approved the Asia Camonensis conservation plan.
Okay, thank you, John. Takes us to work paper 5, our annual reports.
Yes, sir. Again, just for council's formal notice, the Honorable Premier and Minister of Sustainability and Climate Resiliency on October 7th in the Parliament tabled council's annual reports for 2020 and 2021.
Okay. Thanks.
We need
Thanks.
to deal with E.
Pardon me?
We need to deal with E, the seabird.
That's going back to E, the seabird conservation.
Yes, sir. No work paper for that. Just to let council know that the public consultation was conducted and is now concluded. We did print notices of the consultation, radio coverage, in-person meetings, as well as social media posts. We had over 100 responses received, which is a very good participation rate for a consultation. Most people were familiar with the birds and had reviewed the draft plan before responding. Obviously, most people support conservation of native and threatened species like these seabirds. There were a few particular parts of the plan that the feedback focused on within the generally positive and supportive overall engagement. We expect to have the consultation report to council for council consideration during the first quarter of 2023.
Okay, thanks, John. Brings us to section 4 of our agenda, or our reports. Public education and outreach.
Yes, sir.
Coming under this, we have the stingray handling guide notes.
Yeah. So as council recalled, these guidance notes were passed by council in 2019. DOE have refreshed their appearance and are reissuing them now. We've also got them up on the DOE website on a new stingray page, information page, and we'll be working on more related public education on stingrays and North Sound after the new year. and keep adding to this material. The actual guidance notes themselves have been sent to the holders of WIS licenses, along with their reminder to apply for their 2023 license. So we know that people are seeing it since they're applying to renew their WIS licenses. So this is the 2019 guidance notes that council had already passed into force. We just kind of putting them up a little bit, and they are being, the refreshed version is being rolled out to WIS users as well as the public over time.
Okay, thanks for that input, John. Thanks.
Mr. Chair, through you,
Sure.
could I ask, has there been any feedback from the WIS license holders on the guidelines?
Little feedback so far. A few of them have thanked us for providing them again, have assured us that they are putting them in with their sort of operations manuals. So everybody is taking it on board, is all we can say about it so far.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Secretary.
Thanks, Lisa. Any other questions on that before we move on? Takes us then to B, under 4, is climate change.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to couch this meeting's report in the context of the recently held climate change conference in Egypt, or COP27. And disappointingly, this year's COP27 has not really significantly advanced the mitigation agenda in terms of closing that mitigation gap to stabilize average global temperatures to 1.5 degrees C per the Paris Agreement, which will, of course, continue to worsen the Cayman Islands' vulnerability to climate risks and increase losses and damages, particularly to biodiversity. So it's therefore critically important that we ramp up our adaptation and resiliency efforts locally, especially to better understand how and where nature-based solutions can address this mounting climate challenge. Since this is the case, it is especially important that we enhance our protected area systems, as we have just been discussing, through some of the nominated areas, and the integration of ecosystem services into our national planning systems. In addition to receiving climate benefits from these efforts will also address other global goals that Cayman is working towards, such as the 30 by 30 biodiversity challenge that Mr. Burton mentioned, to help reduce or reverse biodiversity loss, but also in terms of reducing disaster risk to communities, particularly coastal properties and coastally sited infrastructure. It's these types of measures and others that the country's updated climate change policy is seeking to address or utilize specifically, having now identified the long list of risks through comprehensive climate change risk assessment performed earlier this year. And we now have that risk assessment evidence report finalized by the UK consultants in collaboration with the technical working group that comprises the Ministry of Sustainability and Climate Resiliency and the Department of Environment. Along with this evidence report will be a non-technical summary, which will be soon into the public domain. We're just waiting on final edits from the publishers on that. The technical working group that I just mentioned is currently collating policy measures proposed by the Climate Change Risk Assessment Workshop stakeholders and assessing several frameworks for framing of the strategy or the policy on a whole, including the use of an impact systems approach coming out of COP27's adaptation agenda, which has moved, thankfully, the Glasgow Climate Action Pact agenda for adaptation somewhat. And this document, or this systems approach, seeks to accelerate adaptation globally and locally towards resilience in coastal and ocean systems, water and natural systems, resilient food and agricultural systems, and resilient human settlements and infrastructure systems, and is aligning actually quite nicely with some of the policy areas that we have already selected for the updated climate change policy. So the technical working group is, of course, cognizant of aligning the climate change policy measures with other existing and emergency policies, such as the National Energy Policy, which is under review, and the draft Food and Nutrition Security Policy recently out for public consultation. It's anticipated that the draft updated climate change policy will be in a public consultation stage by February of next year, and that members of council, along with the public, will be able to review and provide feedback on the interventions that, among other things, employ National Conservation Act instruments to achieve strategic aims, namely protected areas and their management plans and conservation plans for protected species. Lastly, Mr. Chair, while the major achievement of COP27 could be the agreement to establish at long last a loss and damage fund for small and vulnerable communities or countries, it highlights once again the inability of the Cayman Islands as an overseas territory to access these UNFCCC facilities. However, it's still vital that we quantify our adaptation and resiliency needs as identified in our updated climate change policy, alongside the cost of reducing our carbon footprint, and to allocate adequate national resources in ongoing budget cycles, including the Environmental Protection Fund appropriations and other special vehicles, as we've just heard. Take swift action to assess any available or any unlocked climate financing, including those offered by the private sector, both locally as well as globally, and create innovative homegrown mechanisms which may also have regional benefits, such as operationalizing the Commonwealth Climate Growth Fund and exploring opportunities for blue carbon crediting. So with that, Mr. Chair, I look forward to reporting on progress in some of these areas or initiatives at our next general meeting, and open the discussion now to other members of council.
Thank you, Lisa. And any questions for Lisa on that report?
No, but I just want to say thank you, Lisa, for continuing to champion the climate change regulations and support with the Department of Environment and all the team involved. It is very, very important, and members of the community are very, very grateful for this. So I just want to share my thanks and look forward to seeing the next step of this go moving forward.
Thanks, Jess. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Takes us to 4C, Environmental Assessment Boards.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Council will be aware that there are currently 4 active environmental impact assessment processes ongoing. So I just would like to provide brief updates on exactly where we are with each of those processes. I also just want to say that at the request of the ministry, we have also developed a page on the National Conservation Council's website, which actually shows the current status of any EIA that is current, that is active. So I would urge you, if you would like to get some potentially more details, or if you've missed something I've said, it's going to be on that page. So the first one I'll tackle is the Integrated Solid Waste Management System, the ReGen project. Essentially, work is proceeding on that EIA as per the agreed terms of reference. The EAB is currently waiting for the project proponents to provide us with chapters of the environmental impact statement, or the environmental statement, to review. So we expect to get those chapters from the consultants So that is basically with the proponent, and the EAB is waiting to receive documentation from the ongoing work for review. Just a reminder that once the environmental statement is drafted, that too, the draft environmental statement will go out for public consultation and review. So that will happen, and we will obviously inform members as well as the public when that happens. As members will recall, the EIA directive requires the public consultation on the environmental statement to include a public meeting. So that will be happening, and it will be well publicized. The second environmental impact assessment that is, we think this has actually sort of fallen away, is the Hutland Road extension. Council members will remember that we prepared a screening opinion on this earlier this year, I believe. And we've heard nothing further from the proponents, the National Roads Authority and the ministry with responsibility for roads. The ultimate result of the screening opinion was that we recommended that it would require an environmental impact assessment. So unless we hear something further, we are assuming that that project has fallen away. The third project is East-West Arterial. This has been very much in the news recently because of all of the traffic issues. So I can report that the NRA have now selected the consultants to carry out the EIA. The EAB has had preliminary meetings with the EIA coordinator from the consulting team selected by the NRA. We have provided, the Department of Environment has provided data that we hold that was requested by the environmental impact assessment consultants to inform their work. So they've been provided with those data, and we are essentially awaiting a draft set of terms of reference for the EAB review. That's basically where we're at with that one. The last active environmental impact assessment, and therefore environmental assessment board, is the Cayman Brac Marina, where the applicant has actually submitted voluntarily to an environmental impact assessment. They have now undertaken the process of proposing consultants to carry out the work based on the scoping opinion provided by the Environmental Assessment Board, and we can confirm now that the consultants for that EIA have been selected, and they are also working to develop draft terms of reference for review by the EAB. So I'm just going to finish off there, and if anybody has any questions, I'm happy to take them.
Any questions, council, for Ms. G on the EABs?
Through you, Mr. Chair, would Ms. Gina be able to sort of give any kind of idea as to when we might be seeing some of the draft TORs?
I'm afraid not, Lisa. I mean, that is really in the hands of the consultants who are preparing them. Like I said, we've had, discussions, certainly in terms of the East-West Arterial. We've had discussions with the Environmental Impact Assessment Coordinator, and we have answered her questions and provided the data that they requested. So we really are just waiting. I think that my recollection for their proposed timeline is that they would provide those TOR to us in early to mid-January. So I'm hoping that that is still holding. I've had no indication that their timeline has slipped. So hopefully, Lisa, it will be as per their proposed timeline, which is, I think, early to mid-January is my recollection.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions on those?
No, Mr. Chair, from me.
No more.
Take,
Yes.
and thanks, Mr. G, for the.
Welcome. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Takes us to section 5, and we have A under section 5, and of course it's ratification of the Bayview EIA opinion.
John, are you taking this, or would you like me to do this?
I can take it if you'd like, ma'am. I can just, yeah, I can take it.
Okay.
So,
Yeah, go ahead. No.
council will recall that this was a proposed development, the Bayview community, which consisted of 3 10-story apartment buildings and 20 single-family homes, an amenities area, a 70-foot wide canal, and obviously the associated development to go along with it. Council is actually being asked to ratify a decision which council took by correspondence in July 2021. It was subject to ratification at the next suitable general meeting, but due to a mistake, it was not tabled before now, so apologies for that. This is the site where the work is being conducted for council's recollection. The proposal was screened to determine if an environmental impact assessment is required, and I would draw council's attention to a few things for council's particular consideration, particularly the Department of Environment screening opinion and the other material available in the working paper, I think it's 07B. At the time that the application was given for council's consideration in 2021, the site had already been cleared of the majority of mangroves, and construction of the canal had commenced as a result of implementing a 2019 planning permission for a 30-lot subdivision of the site. Council did note at the time in 2021 there were a few ways that the proposed development could be improved, such as maintaining the mangrove buffer for the site and ensuring the protection of the Goldfield Rec site. Although it was also noted at the time that obviously the entire 7 Mile Beach West Bay Peninsula needs a strategic impact assessment to understand the housing, hotel infrastructure, as well as human, economic, and environmental development needs of that section of Grand Cayman and within the country, really. Council felt that this individual project, as proposed at the time, did not require an EIA to understand the impacts of this proposal. So that's the background to it, Mr. Chairman, and I would therefore like to turn it back over to council to consider for ratification or not of their original conclusion.
Sure. So council, it is therefore proposed, the proposal before us is that the National Conservation Council ratify the decision that no EIA is required for the CPA to make an informed decision regarding the Bayview Community Planning application of 2021. So the move now is that we ratify the decision that we took in 2021 that no EIA is required for this project. So may I have a mover for this motion, please?
Mr. Chair, I will move the motion that we accept the decision of council made in 2021 in respect of the screening opinion for the Bayview development.
Thank you, Ms. G. A
Mr.
second?
Chair, I'm happy to second the motion, Mr. Chair, but I will abstain from the voting.
Those in favor? Thanks, Tim. Those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, Mr. Chair.
Aye, Mr. Chair.
Any against? Those abstaining?
Aye,
Aye,
Mr.
Mr. Chair.
I abstain, Mr. Chair, not being involved in the original application.
Mr. Chair, I have to abstain because of my involvement in the preparation of the screening opinion.
Sure. Okay, and the motion then has been ratified. Takes us to section B of 5, and it's ratification of the cement plant. And again, it was an EIA opinion.
So, Mr. Chairman, in September this year, council reviewed an application for a cement plant and storage facility in the industrial park area of Georgetown. Whether it would need an EIA or not needed to be, then need to be ratified at the next suitable general meeting, which is this one. I would draw council's attention to the Department of Environment screening opinion, which is available as working paper, I think it's 08B, that council would have had sight of. It should be noted that the proposed silos for this storage facility are 97 feet tall, which is approximately equal to a 6 to 7 story building. However, the application site is already man-modified, located on Seymour Road in Industrial Park, Georgetown, and there's already the presence of existing silos of the same type in the surrounding area, as well as heavy equipment and other traffic. There's also a bit of distance between the site and the Astro-Latibus Highway. It's therefore likely that additional visual and noise impacts to the area will be minimal, though there is a strong potential for fine dust particles from the site to become a nuisance to nearby land parcels, including visual impacts. Council noted that a fair bit of cement waste, including air pollution, is likely from the operation of the site, and so waste handling and pollution control through both site design and operational planning should be considered at this stage in the project. Taking all this into account, council felt that this individual project, as proposed at the time, did not require an EIA to understand its impacts. And I'll now turn it over to council, Mr. Chairman, to consider the ratification or not of their original conclusion.
Thank you, John. Council, we took the decision that no EIA was required for this project. And so at this point then, you're being asked to ratify the decision that we made at that time that an EIA is not required for this project. And of course, the project being the cement plant facility projected for the North Sound area, as you just heard John detail for us. So can I have a mover for this ratification, please?
Mr. Chair,
I so move.
sorry.
Sorry.
Adrian, Mr. Chair, I would just like to make one additional intervention.
Sure.
Which was that although we did not recommend an EIA, we did note in the screening opinion that we strongly recommended that the Central Planning Authority require the applicant to submit an air quality assessment and operations plan, which would provide mitigation measures with respect to dust emissions and air pollution control equipment to protect workers who are at the cement plant or near the cement plant and anyone living in the environment around that area. Anyone essentially who is going to be regularly exposed to the emissions from the facility. And also that the operations plan should also identify how the tank residue that John spoke of earlier would be handled in order to avoid operators disposing of this material in an uncontrolled manner in the environment. As we've seen, I'm sure council members recall various reports of cement plant trucks emptying sort of the remains of their tank in mangrove areas at the side of the road, et cetera. So that was a recommendation, which is all that we are able to make on this, on behalf of the NCC, to the Central Planning Authority. So over to, I
Yeah,
think it was
sure.
Adrian, who's going
Sure,
to.
thanks for that input,
Yes.
Ms. G. Again, council, we're saying there are known factors that should be considered as the plan is being considered. But the overriding thing is that we didn't see that it was necessary for an EIA to be done on this project. But we were suggesting that these issues were things that should be considered. They should look into this. Adrian, you had moved that we ratify our decision.
Yes, Mr. Chair.
So then I'm looking for a seconder.
I second Tricia Bradley.
Thanks, Patricia. Those in favor?
Aye.
Mr. Chair, aye.
Aye, Mr. Chair, Tim Austin.
Aye, Mr. Chair.
Any against? The abstentions?
Mr. Chair.
Aye, Mr. Chair.
Evelyn.
Mr. Chair, I abstain because of my involvement in the
Sure.
EIA, the screening opinion.
Okay, thanks, and the decision has been ratified. Takes us to...
Mr. Chair?
Sure.
Sorry, I wonder through you, Mr. Chair, if the members of the Department of Environment could indicate whether a decision has been taken on these two applications by the Planning Department.
Mr. Chair, could I invite the manager for our Environmental Management Unit, Ms. Loren Dombowski, to tell us whether she has any knowledge of the, whether CPA has approved these. We don't automatically get notified of approvals or decisions of the CPA, so we have to look for them in the minutes, and I'm not sure whether that exercise has been carried out yet or not. So Loren, if you're there, could you please let us know if you've managed to find any information on approval for these two projects?
Hi, good afternoon, Council. The Bayview application is listed on the online planning system as awaiting notices, meaning that the applicant hasn't sent out their notification to the neighbors and landowners nearby, and they haven't done so in the last year, so I'm not sure what that means for the status of that application, whether the applicant is progressing it or not. And with respect to the cement plant application, I can see that it was considered by the CPA at a meeting in November, but the minutes haven't yet been published, so I can't see what the outcome of that meeting was.
Thanks very much, Loren.
Thanks, Loren.
Thank you, Loren.
It takes us down then to section C of our new matters. This CNET license renewal application.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. An application for a CNET renewal was received by the Department of Environment dated 4th October 2022. I would draw Council's attention to the application and associated material found in Working Paper 09A. And I would further draw council's attention to the letter sent by the applicant, working paper 09C, asking for council's consideration of the application for the renewal of the CNET license. Also included in that working paper 09A is a Department of Environment summary of a recent use of this CNET. The license for the CNET had expired on 6th of May 2022. The applicant used the CNET to catch fish on 1st October 2022. License condition number 6 for the use of a CNET requires a prior notification of the Department of Environment before the net is used. The department was not notified in advance of the 1st October 2022 use of the CNET. This license condition 6 reflects Directive 11.3 of the National Conservation Council License and Permit Directives. Responding to the fishing which occurred on 1st October 2022, after the expiry of the previous CNET license and without prior notification of the Department of Environment under license condition number 6, is within the remit of the Department of Environment. Having spoken with the applicant to determine the facts surrounding the fishing incident, the DOE has advised the council of its intention at this time to accept the applicant's explanation of the fishing that occurred and to not recommend the incident to the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions. However, given the circumstances, the Department of Environment is referring the matter of the CNET license renewal application, 4th October 2022, for council's decision rather than decision by the department on delegated authority. CNET licenses are issued and administered under sections 22 to 24 of the National Conservation Act and Part 3 of the National Conservation Council License and Permit Directives. Under the directives, the council, in considering applications for licenses, shall have regard to all the circumstances of the application, including failure to comply with license conditions. The Department of Environment recommends to the council that, given the failure to notify in advance of fishing with a CNET, i.e. license condition 6, and the use of the net after expiry of the license, the CNET license should not be renewed at this time. The department would further recommend that that an application for a CNET license by this license holder or for this net not be considered if submitted for another 1 year from the date of the decision, i.e. before 14 December 2023. But I'll now turn it over to the council, Mr. Chairman, for council to consider the application for renewal of the CNET license under the circumstances outlined.
Okay, council, there's a motion before us and comes with the suggestion from DOE. You have heard the information which John has just shared with us again and has been shared with us in writing prior to this date. Given the factors in there, what happened, how it happened, and the rest of it, the proposal before us is, it is therefore proposed that the National Conservation Council decide in regards to the CNET license renewal application of the 4th of October 2022. A, the license not be renewed at this time. B, an application for a CNET license by the license holder for this net, not be considered if submitted before the 14th of December 2023. An application for a CNET, this is B again, an application for a CNET license by this license holder or for this net not be considered if submitted before 14th of December 2023. In other words, we would not entertain an an application for renewal of the license before a year from this date. This is the motion before us. If there's no questions on it, then I would ask for a mover. If there's a question, then go ahead.
I can move, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. A seconder?
Mr. Chair, I'll second the motion.
Those in favor?
Aye.
Mr. Chair.
Aye, Mr. Chair. Tim Austin.
Aye, Patricia Bradley.
Any against? Those abstaining?
I abstain.
Mr. Chair, I will also abstain since the recommendation came from the DOE.
Mr. Chairman, I abstain.
Okay. And the motion is passed. And it is passed saying that the application will not be renewed now, and that no new application would not be considered in the next year, which takes us up, of course, to a year from now, the 14th of December, 2023. It was noted that council understands the cultural implication and all of this that goes with the CNET, and I do believe that this is the only one in operation in the Cayman Islands. And but we're saying for the next year, the license would not be renewed. Takes us to section D of 5 on our agenda for today, starfish guideline notes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Council will recall that starfish handling guidelines were originally approved by Council in 2019. And so this is basically a request to reapprove those guidelines or guidance notes, which have been repackaged by the Department of Environment to be a little bit more user-friendly. The guidance notes are really issued to help clarify safe handling practices for the West Indian sea star at Starfish Point, which respects their status as both a protected species and a natural resource of the Cayman Islands. Under the National Conservation Act, take has a very broad definition, and it includes hunting, collecting, killing, destroying, damaging, injuring, disturbing, harassing, wounding, molesting, impeding, etc., of any specimen in any way or attempting to do so, and includes incidental taking. So clearly, the Department of Environment was faced with a bit of a conundrum in that this is a protected species, yet there was this well-established practice of picking up and handling starfish in this particular location. And we felt that the best way forward in this regard was to allow our conservation officers, with the benefit of these guidance notes being provided to members of the public and visitors, to apply discretion and not consider basically anyone who is holding a sea star flat in their hand, while fully submerged underwater and supported in the person's hands to not be considered as take. So that's basically what we have defined as allowed handling. So somebody can hold it flat, fully submerged underwater, and then put it back where they found it in its habitat. However, the guidance notes also specify handling restrictions which would be considered take when handling starfish or any other echinoderms anywhere in the Cayman Islands. And obviously, this would be an offense under the National Conservation Act. So anybody elevating any part of the starfish out of or above the water would be committing an offense. Bending any part of the starfish in any direction, including manipulating its arms, holding the starfish by its feet, or inserting anything into any part or opening of the animal, interacting with the starfish in such a manner as to break or pierce the outer skin of the starfish, or interacting with the starfish in such a manner as to wound it, i.e. breaking off or otherwise causing a foot or arm to become separated from the main body wholly or partially. So those would be considered take and subject to prosecution. We also outline some best practice in relation to reef-safe sunscreen, and then provide information on how anyone witnessing an activity that they feel is in violation of these guidance notes, giving information how they can report that to the DOE, and what they need to do in order to help us move an investigation forward. So, Mr. Chair, I would just move that council basically approve the repackaged guidance notes on handling of starfish that is in your agenda bundle as working paper 10A.
Okay, council, working paper 10A. Ms. G has moved the acceptance of this. Could I have a seconder?
I second, Patricia.
Those in favor?
Aye, Mr. Chair.
Aye, Mr. Chair. Tim
Aye,
Martin.
Mr. Chair.
Aye, Mr. Chair.
Aye, Mr. Chair.
Any against? Those abstaining?
I will abstain, Mr. Chair.
And it has been approved. Takes us to E, working paper 11, and this is the K-Rock Quarry, the EIA screening.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This involves an application for a quarry north of the Meager Bay Pond protected area. Meager Bay Pond, as everybody knows, is one of Cayman's oldest protected areas. It has a 300-foot wide band of mangroves around its margin, which was originally protected as an animal sanctuary in 1976 under the Animals Law. And when the National Conservation Act came into effect, those animal sanctuaries that were still in existence under the Animals Law were brought forward under the National Conservation Law as protected areas. The proposed quarry has an area of approximately 66.4 acres, and it's basically situated between an existing complex of submerged quarries and the Meager Bay Pond protected area to the south. The proposed quarry is to have 2 lakes and yielding each 3 million cubic yards and the other 2 million cubic yards, both based on an estimated depth of 50 feet below mean sea level. The Department of Environment reviewed the application and considered all of the implications for the environmental impact, particularly on the Meager Bay Pond protected area, which is in hydrological continuity with the site and with the central mangrove wetland to the north. I think it is also worth pointing out that the Meager Bay Pond Protected Area Management Plan was written and adopted by Cabinet on the 15th of February 2022. The goals of the plan, which are relevant to this application, are to establish separation between waters of the protected area and the adjacent quarries, to preserve the protected area's ability to overflow and discharge after extreme rain events, to facilitate natural regeneration of black mangrove forest and other wetland communities around the pond, and to recover and maintain the historical seasonal patterns of diversity and abundance of bird life and other native species in the protected area. When the Department of Environment reviewed the application, our main concern essentially in screening the application was to do with the impact of the proposed quarry on the terrestrial ecology and site hydrology. Some of the factors that we considered were that Meager Bay Pond is a seasonally important feeding resource for both resident and migratory water birds due to the pond's high biological productivity. Alone and in combination with the much more extensive central mangrove wetland, this protected area meets the criteria for designation as a Ramsar site, should this level of protection be something which government wishes to take forward. The seasonal drying of the Meager Bay Pond protected area is one of the characteristics of the site that led to its designation originally as an animal sanctuary, because when the water level in the pond decreases, there's a concentration of fish in the shallower water, leading to an aggregation of resident and migratory water and shore birds. And this natural phenomenon of mass aggregation of birds has not recently been witnessed at Meager Bay Pond, and we believe that it is partly due, or if not wholly due, to the inability of the pond to drain appropriately. So this is because there's been quite significant interruption in the natural hydrological regime for Meager Bay Pond as a result of the existing quarries and the operation of them. So there are two main types of interruptions in this natural hydrological regime. The first being the prevention of the movement of water north into the central mangrove wetland when the water level in the pond is too high. And the second is that there is water overflowing from the quarries into the pond, preventing Meager Bay Pond protected area from drying out and producing this biological phenomenon of the mass aggregation of birds. So this was a big concern for us, and we're particularly concerned about the fact that the site that is the subject of the application, when we look at the digital elevation models on the Geographic Information System, which Lands and Survey provides for us, we can see that the site is probably the easiest path for surface water to flow, allowing Meager Bay Pond to drain into the central mangrove wetland to the north when the water level in the pond exceeds the threshold that it needs to exceed in order to flow out of the pond. Therefore, if that site was to become a quarry and the quarry was to be surrounded by a berm to separate the quarry from the pond, it may end up causing a significant adverse effect on the Meager Bay Pond protected area because of this inability of the pond to drain and therefore not dry out, and for the pond to go through its natural wetting and drying cycles that produce the food for these mass aggregation of birds. And we felt that without really understanding the hydrological regime in greater detail, that it would not be possible for the Department of Environment on behalf of the Council to recommend any kind of mitigating measures for the quarry. We also thought that there are issues around air quality specifically dust emissions, and that given that the area where the quarry is located, according to the latest census, has grown by something like 40.8%, that because that would then mean that there are an increasing number of residential receptors in the surrounding area of the site, and that the proposed quarry will likely exacerbate the existing nuisance issues around dust, given that the application itself contained no discussion of control measures for this particular impact. Noise and vibration was also a concern. We felt that there was no relevant information that was readily available which quantifies the baseline acoustic environment at locations around the proposed quarry. There are not residential receptors directly adjacent to the quarry, but there are existing residential populations in the Bodden Town area in the sort of immediate environs. There are also existing activities within a relatively open and flat landscape where sound could potentially travel long distances. And so given the increase in population and housing in the area, we felt that a noise assessment, which would assess the potential levels of noise generation and provide suggestions of suitable mitigation measures, should be undertaken as part of an EIA. So the end result is that the DOE recommends that the proposed quarry be the subject of an EIA in order to investigate further and address the issues which I have just highlighted.
Thanks, Mr. G. Council, as you have heard, the recommendation before us is that an EIA be required for this project. So if there's no questions on it, do you have any questions on it before I ask for a mover?
Not from me, Mr. Chair.
No questions?
Mr. Chair, just from me, are there still active quarrying activities going on the adjacent sites that we can see in Figure 1?
Yes.
Yes, there are.
Do we have any idea as to how long those activities have been going on and will continue to go on as they are permitted to do?
Yes. In terms of how long they've been going on, it's been several years, probably a decade or more for some of them. And some of the quarries still have significant reserves because of the approval to excavate to 50 feet. We've been making recommendations, to mitigate the overflow, for example, of water. We've certainly directed the condition that one of the quarries be bermed to prevent that overflow, but to the best of my knowledge, that recommendation was not taken up by that direction, was not taken up by the Central Planning Authority. So the quarry that's offending the water is still overflowing. There's nothing to prevent that happening in place. But I suppose that the point is that we've recognized that there are potential impacts occurring because of these quarries. We believe that what we're seeing in terms of the changes to the natural hydrological regime in the Meager Bay Pond, we're seeing mangrove die-off, for example, around the pond. And we're not seeing the wetting and drying cycles sort of manifesting as we would normally see them. And so the cumulative effect of adding another quarry, particularly in this location, which, as I mentioned, appears to be the lowest elevation path for water to move out of the pond into the central mangrove wetland, when that sort of spillover threshold has been reached in the pond. There are some dry keys, or there appear to be higher areas immediately north of the pond, that would prevent the water from accessing that route. And you'll see those on the screen there now. They're in the darker green sites north of the pond. The area highlighted in red is the application site. And you can see there are none of those darker green areas there, which indicate that that is the lowest path for any water trying to get out of Meager Bay Pond and into the central mangrove wetland. And we just feel that there needs to be a much better understanding of the hydrology of the area before anybody contemplates approving another quarry in this location.
Thank you, Ms. Gina.
You're welcome.
Any other questions on it? In that case, then, may I ask for a mover that this project requires an EIA?
I can move, Mr. Chair.
I second, Patricia.
Those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Mr. Chair.
Aye, Mr. Chair, Tim Austin.
Against? Those abstaining?
Mr. Chair, I have to abstain because of my involvement in the preparation of the screening opinion.
Mr. Chair, good one.
Okay, the recommendation then is approved that this project requires an EIA. Takes us down to section 6 of our agenda, and it's a listing of proposed dates for our 2023 meetings. First one being March the 29th, June the 21st for the second, the 13th of September for the third, and the 6th of December for the fourth. And we know and understand that these are subject to vary a little as we approach the time, but these are the proposed dates for our 2023 meetings as of now, and these are our general meetings, of course. Takes us into section 7. Any other business? Is there anything else that any member would like to bring to the table at this time?
Mr. Chair, I would just like to say that on behalf of the Department of Environment, I'd just like to extend greetings to all of the council members for a very peaceful and happy Christmas holiday season, and to thank everybody for their support and all the hard work in the past year, including you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Ms. G. And
Thank you, Gina.
Thank you, Gina.
Well, you're all very welcome.
And thank you to you and your staff at the Department of Environment for all of your hard work and preparation that goes into all of these working papers and background reports. Thank you.
Welcome.
Definitely.
Thanks.
sure, and
Thank you. And just to those who are listening from the public, we really appreciate your engagement. These are important, and thank you so much, and wishing all of you a very happy holidays and happy new year when it comes.
thanks. And on behalf of Council Ms. G, of course, I would like to say thanks to you, the department, for all of your professional input that you provide for the council. We thank you
You're very
so
welcome.
much.
Thank you, too,
And
Mr. Chair.
greetings to all of the members and to the wider public out there who are listening in with us today. Greetings to all of you for the season as it fast approaches us at this time. And there were no other business that needed to be brought to the table, I take it?
Nope.
Not for me, Mr. Chair.
No.
Okay, and in that case, then we have reached the conclusion of our meeting today, and we now stand adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you,
Bye,
Mr.
everyone.
Chair.
Thanks, everyone.
And Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chair.
Merry Christmas, everybody.
Merry
Merry
Christmas.
Merry
Christmas.
Christmas.
Thank you. Merry Christmas.